The station smelled like metal and cold air. Kang Yul had been on Isaravel for 6 weeks, and in those 6 weeks, nothing had happened. That was the job. Stand in the right place. Look official. Make humanity look like it belonged among the stars, even when most of the galaxy still thought of Earth as that small, loud, surprisingly violent planet near the edge of the outer systems. He was 28 years old. He had a short, clean haircut, a pressed uniform, and the kind of stillness that came not from peace but from practice. He had learned a long time ago that the best soldiers were not the ones who moved fast. They were the ones who waited well. The Velhari were a tall people. Pale skin with faint silver markings along their necks and arms. Long fingers. Eyes that were dark and very calm, the way deep water is calm. They had been traveling between stars for over 3,000 years. They had seen empires rise and collapse. They looked at humans the way old professors sometimes look at very energetic first-year students. Politely. With faint amusement. Without real concern. Kang Yul was used to that look. He did not like it, but he was used to it. His assignment that evening was simple. Walk with the royal escort through the station's lower corridor. Princess Era was visiting the diplomatic wing to attend a trade discussion. She was the second heir to the Velhari throne, which meant she was important but not the most important. She had 2 guards from the royal household, tall, serious men in dark armor with long ceremonial weapons that were also real weapons. Kang Yul walked 3 steps behind, which was the correct position for an Earth Honor Guard. Present. Visible. Not in the way. The corridor was long and white and very quiet. Kang Yul noticed the quiet first. Not peaceful quiet. Wrong quiet. The kind of quiet where the background sounds of a busy station have been removed, one by one, without you noticing until they are all gone. No foot traffic. No distant conversation. No hum of service machines in the side corridors. He did not say anything. He simply moved his hand to the side of his belt, close to his sidearm, and shifted his position from 3 steps behind to 1 step behind and 1 step to the left. The 2 royal guards did not notice this. They were trained for threat response, not threat anticipation. It was a small difference. In the next 30 seconds, it would matter very much. The 4 of them came from both ends of the corridor at once. 2 from the front. 2 from behind. They wore plain station clothes, no armor, but they moved like trained men, fast and with purpose, no wasted motion. The 2 royal guards had just enough time to register surprise before the attackers closed the distance. The first guard went down in 4 seconds, struck hard and efficiently. The second managed to raise his weapon before the second attacker hit him from the side and drove him into the wall. The whole front was gone in under 6 seconds. Kang Yul had already moved. He stepped in front of Princess Era, put her physically behind him against the corridor wall, and shot the nearest attacker twice before the men had finished turning toward him. The shots were not elegant. They were accurate. The men dropped. The second attacker from the front adjusted and came at Kang Yul fast, which was the wrong decision. Kang Yul stepped into the attack instead of away from it, took the hit on his left arm instead of his chest, and used the close distance to put the man down with 2 hard strikes to the throat and temple. Not dead. Not able to get up quickly, either. The 2 from behind reached him a second later. He did not have time to turn and shoot. The first one grabbed his weapon arm. Kang Yul let him, twisted with the grip instead of against it, and slammed the man's own momentum into the corridor wall hard enough to crack the casing on a fire suppression unit. The red pipe broke loose. Kang Yul caught it on the way down. What happened in the next 90 seconds was not pretty. It was not the kind of thing that looked good on training reports or diplomatic summaries. It was close and hard and entirely without grace. Kang Yul had a broken forearm, a deep cut from something sharp over his left eye, and the specific focused calm of someone who has stopped thinking and is simply doing what the body knows. When it was over, 3 men were on the floor. 1 was dead. 2 were breathing but not moving. The 4th had tried to run and had gotten 6 steps before Kang Yul had made a decision and fired once. The man was alive, but he was not running anymore. The corridor was very quiet again. Kang Yul turned around. Princess Era was exactly where he had put her. Her back was against the wall. Her hands were at her sides. She was not shaking, which surprised him. She was looking at him with her dark, calm eyes, and her expression was something he could not read, not fear, not relief, not gratitude. Something more careful than all of those. He looked down at his arm. The forearm was wrong. He could feel it. Not bad enough to make him fall, but bad enough to be a problem later. The blood from above his eye had reached his jaw. He wiped it with the back of his hand and looked back at her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice came out even. He was always surprised by that. She looked at him for a moment that felt longer than it was. "No," she said. Her voice was very composed. He noticed she did not ask if he was hurt, but her eyes moved to his arm and stayed there for just a second before coming back to his face. "Would you like me to call someone?" he asked. Another pause. "I will call someone," she said. She reached into the fold of her outer garment and produced a small communication device. She pressed 2 points on it and spoke in Velhari, low and clear, without any visible panic. Kang Yul stood in front of her while she did, facing the corridor, blocking the sight line to the bodies on the floor, because she should not have to look at that while she made the call. He did not think about why he did that. He just did it. The station's security team arrived in 4 minutes. They stopped when they saw the corridor. One of them looked at Kang Yul. Then at the 4 men on the floor. Then back at Kang Yul. Then at his arm. Nobody said anything for a moment. Kang Yul sat down on the floor. Not because he wanted to. Because his legs thought it was a reasonable idea and his brain was too tired to argue. Princess Era looked down at him from above. He looked up at her. "You should sit," she said, and there was something in her voice that was not quite in order and not quite concern. Something between the two. Something new. "I'm fine," he said. She looked at his arm. He sat down. The footage was 43 seconds long. Queen Hannah watched it 17 times. Her personal assistant, who had worked in the royal palace for 31 years, had never seen her watch anything more than 4 times. He stood to the side of the room in silence and counted, and said nothing, because that was the correct thing to do. The footage was from the station's security system. The angle was not perfect, slightly above and to the side, but it caught everything clearly enough. It caught the 2 royal guards going down. It caught the human soldier step in front of the princess before the attackers had even fully committed to their positions. It caught the shot, the grab, the twist, the broken pipe. It caught the 90 seconds in the middle that made the assistant look away twice on the 3rd viewing. It caught the moment at the end when the human sat down on the floor, bleeding from his arm and his face, and asked the princess if she would like him to call someone. Queen Hannah paused the footage on that last frame. She looked at it for a long time. Then she closed it. "Bring him here," she said. The assistant did not ask for clarification. There was only one him in the context of that footage. The formal message sent to Earth's diplomatic office described the situation as a commendation visit. It used phrases like deep gratitude and ceremonial honor and brief stay. It was warm and specific and gave no actual timeline for return. Day read the message 3 times at his small desk in the Earth diplomatic station on Velhar Prime. He was a xenolinguist, which meant he understood not just words but what words were hiding. He read it 3 times and then put it down and rubbed his face with both hands. He was 26, thin, with dark circles under his eyes from staying up too late reading Velhari grammar. He was very good at his job. Right now, his job was telling Kang Yul that the most powerful ruler in this part of the galaxy wanted him in her palace, and that this was framed as an honor, but that honors like this came with soft walls that were very hard to climb. He met Kang Yul at the transport dock. Kang Yul was in a clean uniform, his left arm in a support brace, the cut above his eye closed with 2 small strips. He looked the same as always. Like nothing had happened. Like he was waiting for a bus. "Congratulations," Day said. "On what?" Kang Yul said. "On being invited to the palace." "I wasn't invited. I was told." Day pointed at him. "Yes. Exactly. That's what I want to talk to you about." They walked. Day talked. He explained that Velhari commendations at the royal level were real, but they were also sometimes the beginning of something longer. He explained that the queen was very old, very intelligent, and very accustomed to getting what she wanted by making it sound like something else. He explained that the correct strategy was to be respectful, receive the honor, express gratitude, and request a return date as quickly and politely as possible. Kang Yul listened to all of this. "I just want to go home," he said. Day looked at him. "I know. I'm saying don't say that." The guest quarters were in the east wing of the palace, which Day told him was significant because the east wing received morning light, which in Velhari culture meant the guest was considered someone with a future worth watching. Kang Yul looked at the rooms, larger than his entire apartment on Earth, with a ceiling that curved upward in a smooth arch and furniture made from a pale material he didn't recognize, and sat on the edge of the bed and thought about how much he didn't care about the cultural significance of morning light. He filed his first formal return request the next morning. A polite reply came 6 hours later. It said the queen looked forward to receiving him shortly. He filed a second request 4 days later. The reply was nearly identical. The days passed slowly and not unpleasantly, which was somehow worse than if they had been difficult. The palace staff was formal but not unkind. The food was strange but not bad. The gardens visible from his window were extraordinary, tall silver-green trees with leaves that turned slightly when the wind moved, like they were paying attention. He walked the corridors when he was allowed to. He read what translated Velhari texts Day could bring him. He did his morning exercises in the courtyard at a time when it was empty, which was apparently surprising to 2 palace attendants who stopped in the archway and watched with expressions he could not fully read. On the 4th day, Princess Era came to see him. She said she was checking on his recovery. She looked at his arm. She asked if the pain was manageable. He said yes. There was a pause that went on slightly too long. She asked if he found the palace comfortable. He said yes. Another pause. She left after 12 minutes. She came back on the 7th day. This time the visit was 17 minutes. She asked him what Earth was like. He described it simply: the weather, the cities, the way the sky looked at night from somewhere without too many lights. She listened carefully, the way she seemed to listen to everything, like she was storing it somewhere. She said Velher Prime had 2 moons. He said he had noticed. She said most visitors did not bother to look up. She came back on the 10th day. 24 minutes. They talked about nothing important and everything was very interesting. On the 12th day, a palace attendant came to Kang Yul's rooms in the morning and told him the queen would see him now. The throne room was large and not what he expected. He had expected decoration, color, a show of wealth. It was almost plain. High ceilings, dark stone, and light that came from sources he could not locate. The queen was seated at the far end, and she looked exactly like her portraits, which meant either the portraits were very good or she had always looked this way, ageless, composed, a woman made of patience. She looked at him for a moment before speaking. "You saved my daughter," she said. Her Velhari was being translated through the small device Day had attached to the inside of his collar. The voice in his ear was flat and accurate. "Yes," he said. "You did it without hesitation." There wasn't time for hesitation. Something moved behind her eyes. Not quite a smile. A recognition. "You are to remain at the palace," she said pleasantly. "For the foreseeable future." Kang Yul looked at her. The room was very still. "May I ask why?" he said. She looked at him the way someone looks at a question they were waiting to be asked. The court around them was silent. Somewhere near the side wall, Day made a very small, very controlled sound of distress. The queen did not answer. She simply continued to look at him with that calm, patient expression, and he understood, with the particular clarity of someone who has just realized the shape of the situation, that she did not feel the need to explain herself. Not yet. Commander Rin did not slam doors. She was far too professional for that. She closed them, though. Firmly. With a specific kind of controlled precision that communicated, to anyone who understood Velhari body language, exactly what slamming would have communicated. She had been head of royal security for 11 years. In those 11 years, she had overseen the safety of the queen, the first heir, and Princess Era with no significant failures. She had reviewed every guard in the palace personally. She had designed the rotation systems, the patrol routes, the response protocols. She had done everything correctly, and her people were the best the Empire had. And now there was a human in the East Wing with a support brace on his arm and orders from the Queen herself to be placed on Princess Era's personal detail. She reviewed his file again. Earth Defense Corps. 6 years of service. 2 conflict postings. Several commendations, though Velhari intelligence on Earth's military structure was incomplete enough that she could not fully gauge their weight. A clean record. No political history. No affiliations outside his unit. She closed the file and looked out her office window at the courtyard below, where the human was doing his morning exercises. She had been told he did them every day at the same time. She had been told, by 2 of her own guards who had stopped to watch, that the exercises were unlike anything they had seen, a combination of forms that mixed structured movement with something much less structured. Controlled and wild at the same time, like 2 different people sharing the same body. She made a note. She was not sure yet what the note meant. Kang Yul was given a briefing by a palace protocol officer named Su, who was small, extremely efficient, and spoke very fast. The briefing covered forms of address, correct positioning during court events, the specific angles of bowing appropriate for different ranks, the 14 situations in which speaking without being spoken to was permissible, and the 3 situations in which it was never permissible regardless of circumstance. The briefing lasted 2 hours. Su gave him a written summary in translated text. He read it 3 times that evening. He made mistakes anyway. The first week was a quiet, consistent education in everything he didn't know. He bowed at the wrong depth to a minor lord and had to be corrected afterward by Day in a whispered conversation that was more uncomfortable for Day than for him. He spoke during a formal meal before the senior guest had been served, which was apparently a significant error, though nobody said so directly. They just became slightly cooler for the rest of the evening. He made direct eye contact with a duke during a formal gathering, which in Velhari court culture at that level of rank was something close to a challenge. The duke had been too startled to be properly offended. He had simply stared back, and Kang Yul had held the look for 2 full seconds before Day stepped on his foot under the table. "You can't do that," Day said afterward. "He was staring at me first," Kang Yul said. "He's allowed to stare at you. You're new. You're human. You're interesting. Staring back at a duke it's a whole thing. Don't do it." Kang Yul nodded. He learned. He was faster at it than Day had expected, which Day mentioned once and then did not mention again because Kang Yul's expression made it clear he didn't need the praise. His position on Era's detail was a quiet, constant negotiation with Commander Rin. She did not try to exclude him, the Queen's orders were the Queen's orders, but she built her schedules and rotations in ways that kept his role minimal. He was always 3 steps back. Never the first response. Present, visible, and carefully marginal. He understood what she was doing. He didn't fight it. He showed up every day, did the job exactly as assigned, learned the routes and the rhythms of the palace's security structure, and waited. He was very good at waiting. Princess Era's daily life was not what he expected. He had imagined something ceremonial and slow. Formal meetings. Long meals. A great deal of sitting in important rooms looking important. There was some of that. But there was also a full schedule of political study, regional briefings, trade analysis, 2 hours every other day with military advisors, and a reading habit that seemed to cover everything from history to engineering to what Day told him were Velhari philosophical texts that were famously difficult even for native speakers. She was not decorative. She was being prepared. She was also, he noticed, very carefully watched by everyone around her, all the time. Not just for her safety. For her reactions. Every person in that palace was reading her, measuring her, calculating. She moved through it all with a stillness that reminded him, a little, of himself. He wondered if she had also learned it, or if she had been born with it. On a quiet afternoon in the 3rd week, she appeared in the small side garden where he was waiting during a break in her schedule. She was carrying a flat wooden board with a grid on it and small carved pieces in 2 colors. "Do you play?" she said. He looked at the board. "I don't know what that is." She sat down across from him at the low stone table and began setting out the pieces. "I will show you." The game was like chess but more complicated, with pieces that could change their own rules under certain conditions and a board that had a secondary grid overlaid on the first. She explained the rules clearly and simply. He listened. He asked 2 questions. She answered them. He lost in 9 minutes. She reset the board without a word. He lost again. And again. He lost 23 games across 5 sessions, and in each game he lasted a little longer, made slightly fewer errors, and started to see the shape of the logic underneath the rules. The 24th game, he won. It was not luck. She saw that. He had set it up 6 moves before the end, quietly and without showing it on his face, and when the final position closed she sat back and looked at the board for a long time. He said nothing. She got up and left. He sat alone with the board and looked at the pieces and did not smile, though it took a small effort. She did not come to the garden for 2 days. On the 3rd day, she walked in, sat down across from him, and began setting out the pieces. Again, she said. He started placing his side of the board. Again, he said. Somewhere across the garden, in the shadow of the far archway, Commander Rin watched the 2 of them. She was too far away to hear what they said. But she could see them, the princess and the human, sitting across from each other with a board between them, something easy and real in the space around them that she had not expected to see. She was not sure what to do with that. She made another note. Lord Wu was not a violent man. He was something more dangerous than that. He was a patient man. A man who understood that in a court that had been playing the same games for centuries, the winner was never the one who struck first but the one who made everyone else strike in the wrong direction. He had spent 20 years building his position in the Velhari court, piece by piece, favor by favor, debt by debt. He had the right allies, the right connections, and the right amount of dirt on the right amount of people. He had also, it was becoming clear, ordered the assassination attempt on Princess Era. Not directly, of course. He was not that kind of man. But the thread was there, thin and careful, winding from the 4 men in the corridor back through 3 intermediaries to a household account that existed under a name that was technically a different person but practically was not. Commander Rin had found it. She had not yet taken it to the Queen, because in Velhari court politics, what you knew and when you revealed it were 2 completely different decisions with completely different consequences. Wu knew she was looking. So he moved first. The event was a formal court assembly, a seasonal gathering where all the major noble houses presented their regional reports to the royal household. It was old tradition, mostly ceremonial, but it had enough political texture that the right move at the right moment could change the shape of a conversation that would then run for the next several months. Wu's move was elegant. During the session for reviewing the trade agreements of the outer regions, a dry topic that most of the court paid only half attention to, he raised a procedural question about the validity of a contract that Princess Era had countersigned 6 months earlier. The contract itself was fine. The question was not really about the contract. It was about putting her name in front of the court associated with something uncertain, something slightly irregular, something that required explanation. The explanation would require defending. The defending would require spending political energy she would rather not spend. And the next question would come soon after, and the one after that, and each one was small enough to be reasonable but together they were a tide. It was very well done. Princess Era began her answer. She was composed, precise, and clearly prepared. She was always prepared, but Wu had built the trap with just enough complexity that the defense required more steps than the accusation, which was always how these things worked. Kang Yul was standing at the edge of the hall, 3 steps behind and to the left, where an honor guard was supposed to stand. He was watching. He had been watching Wu for the better part of an hour, since the men had entered, and he had noticed something. He did not know Velhari court politics. He did not know the history of these particular alliances, the weight of these specific procedures, the subtle language of what was being done to the princess in front of the assembled court. But he knew what a setup looked like. He knew what it looked like when someone asked a question they already knew the answer to. He knew what it looked like when someone's goal was not to learn something but to make someone else look like they were uncertain. He had seen it in smaller rooms, meaner hallways, much less sophisticated situations. The clothes were different. The language was different. The fundamental shape of it was the same. He waited. He was very good at waiting. But Era's answer was taking on water, slowly, and was listening with the patient expression of someone watching a plan work. Kang Yul stepped forward. Not all the way. He stepped from the edge of the hall to a position that was still technically the space of the guard but significantly more visible. He spoke. He did not have permission to speak. He spoke anyway. "Excuse me," he said. The room turned. The translator at his collar was small and the output was clear. His voice was even. Not loud. Just present. Lord Wu turned to look at him with an expression that was politely confused, the way a man is confused when a piece of furniture speaks. "I'm sorry," Kang Yul said. "I don't understand the procedure well. I'm still learning." He said it plainly, without embarrassment. "But Lord Wu, the account number in the contract you're questioning. Is that different from the account number in the regional ledger from the same period?" A pause. Wu's expression did not change. "That is not relevant to the procedural question." "Maybe not," Kang Yul said. "I just noticed they're different numbers. I thought I was misreading it. The contract says one number and the ledger says another. I'm probably wrong. I don't know the system well enough. But if they're different, doesn't that mean the contract is actually from a different account than the one being questioned?" Silence. Not the polite silence of before. A different silence. The kind that comes when a room full of very intelligent people is rapidly recalculating. Because Kang Yul was right. He had spent 3 weeks watching the palace, reading what he could, learning what Day could teach him, and he had a memory that did not let things go. He had seen the ledger in a briefing document 3 days earlier. He had seen the contract number during the presentation. He had noticed the difference the way he noticed everything, quietly, without announcing it, storing it away. He had not known it was going to matter. He had simply noticed. Wu began to speak. One of the court administrators stepped in before he could finish. There were murmurs. The numbers were checked. The account in question and the account in the contract were, in fact, different. The procedural challenge, built carefully on an assumption that everyone in the room had accepted without checking, was not valid. The session moved on. Wu said nothing more. His expression remained exactly the same. But something behind his eyes was not calm anymore. Princess Era did not look at Kang Yul during the rest of the session. After it ended, when the court had begun to break into smaller conversations, she walked past him at the edge of the hall. She did not stop. But she slowed, just slightly, for one step, and she said something very quietly in Velhari. He didn't catch all of it. He caught one word that Day had taught him early on, because it came up often in formal contexts. It meant, "thank you," but also more than that. Later, in a side corridor, Commander Rin found him. She stood in front of him with her arms at her sides and her expression professionally unreadable. "You should not have spoken," she said. "I know," he said. "It was outside your role." "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment. "The account difference," she said. "Did you actually notice that today? Or did you know it before?" "I noticed it 3 days ago," he said. "I didn't know it would matter until it did." She studied him. This was different from how she usually looked at him. Less suspicious. More like the way she looked at a security problem she was trying to understand. "I want to talk to you about Lord Wu," she said. Kang Yul looked at her. "I know," he said. She blinked. It was the first time he had seen her blink in a way that wasn't controlled. "You know about Wu," she said. "I know there's something," he said. "I don't know the specifics." "You clearly do." Another pause. A longer one. He could see the calculation happening, the same kind of calculation she probably ran on everything, fast and precise and very private. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "The East Garden. Early." She walked away. He watched her go. He thought about what Day had said on the first day, about soft walls and honors with strings. He thought about the corridor on Isaravel and the fire suppression pipe and the 43 seconds of security footage the Queen had watched 17 times. He was starting to understand why she had kept him here. He wasn't sure how he felt about that yet. But he showed up to the East Garden the next morning, early, and Commander Rin was already there. The fourth return request came on a Tuesday. Kang Yul wrote it carefully. He used the formal phrasing Day had taught him. He expressed deep respect for the honor of his placement and sincere gratitude for the hospitality of the royal household. He acknowledged that his time at the palace had been valuable. He requested, with appropriate humility, a specific return date. The response came in 3 hours. It said the queen would be pleased to receive him for tea. Day read the response over his shoulder and was quiet for a moment. "That's not a return date," Kongyul said. "No," Day agreed. "Tea is not a return date." "No." Kongyul looked at the message. "What does tea mean?" Day sat down. In Velhari court culture, when the queen invites someone to personal tea, not formal tea, personal tea, it usually means she wants to have a conversation that isn't being officially recorded. No court. No advisors. No protocol. Just talking. He paused. It's considered a significant gesture. It means she respects the person enough to speak plainly. Kongyul was quiet for a moment. Or, Day added, it means she's about to say something she doesn't want witnessed. That's not reassuring. I know. The tea room was smaller than he expected. Not a grand hall dressed down, but actually small, 4 walls, a low table, 2 seats, and a window that looked out over the garden where the silver-green trees moved slowly in the morning wind. There was tea already poured. It was a pale amber color and smelled like something between rain and cedar. The queen was already seated. No attendants. No court officials. Just her, in a simpler version of her usual clothing, looking out the window. She gestured to the seat across from her without turning. He sat. He picked up the tea because it seemed like the right thing to do and because his hands needed something. She looked at him. "You want to go home," she said. "Yes," he said. "You have said so 4 times now." "I would have said so more, but Day told me the phrasing needed to be different each time or it loses weight." Something shifted in her face. Not quite a smile, but the shape of where one might form. "Your diplomat is clever." "He's also very tired," Kongyul said. "He's been working very hard on my behalf." "I know." She looked down at her tea. "I will tell you something, Kongyul. And I would like you to listen before you respond. Can you do that?" He had been told, several times now, that humans interrupted. He had made a specific effort not to. "Yes," he said. She was quiet for a moment, the way people are quiet when they are choosing their beginning. "The Velhari Empire is very old," she said. "This is considered a strength. In many ways, it is. We have knowledge, stability, resources, relationships with civilizations that have come and gone while we continued. We have seen enough of history to not repeat most of it." A pause. "But old things become rigid. Not because they want to. Because everything that has always worked is trusted, and everything that is new is viewed with caution, and after enough centuries the caution becomes the default, and the default becomes the shape of how people think." Kongyul was quiet. He was listening. "My court," she continued, "has been playing the same game for a very long time. The pieces change. The players change. The game does not. Everyone in that room knows the rules, the positions, the acceptable moves. When Lord Wu attacked my daughter's reputation in the assembly, every person in that room understood exactly what was happening. They knew the move. They were preparing the counter-moves. The entire exchange was going to unfold inside a framework that has existed for 200 years. She looked at him. "And then you spoke." He said nothing. "You did not know the framework," she said. "So you did not follow it. You simply looked at the situation and said what you saw, in plain words, without considering what was allowed or not allowed. And it worked, not because you were more intelligent than my court, but because you were entirely outside the system they were all operating inside." She picked up her tea. Looked at it. "I watched you in the security footage 43 seconds. 4 trained men. A broken arm. A fire suppression pipe." She put the tea down. "You did not fight the way our soldiers fight. You did not follow a system. You responded to what was actually there, in real time, without a pattern to follow. And it was more effective than the pattern." Kongyul looked at her carefully. He was starting to understand the shape of what she was saying. "You're not keeping me here as a guard," he said. No, she said. And not as a trophy. No. Then what? She looked at him steadily. My daughter will be queen. Not today. But one day, and within the range of your lifetime, which is short by our measure but not irrelevant. When she takes the throne, she will face challenges that the Velhari playbook will not solve. I do not know what they will be. But I know the playbook, and I know its limits, and I know that she will need, somewhere in her court, a perspective that has never existed in Velhari politics before. She paused. I want her to know a human well. Not diplomatically. Not at a distance. I want her to think alongside one. To have access to a mind that approaches problems the way yours does, without the weight of 2,000 years of the same answers. Kanyul sat with this for a moment. I'm one person, he said. I'm not all humans. I know, she said. But you are the one who was there. He looked out the window at the trees. They moved. He thought about his apartment on Earth. The particular smell of the city in the morning. His mother's voice on a call. The way the sky looked when it was just turning dark. If I said no, he said carefully, what would happen? She was honest. I would find another way to ask, and then another, for as long as I needed to. She paused. But I am asking you now, directly, because I believe you deserve a direct question. And because I believe, if you think about it, you already know your answer. He looked at her. She looked back, and for the first time he saw something in her that was not political and not calculating. Something that was simply tired, and old, and genuinely worried about her daughter. He asked for a week to decide. She gave him 3 days. On the second night, he was sitting on the outer wall of the east garden. It was a low wall, not a barrier, just a boundary between the garden and the open ground beyond. He had found it 2 weeks ago. It was high enough to see the sky clearly and far enough from the main building that it was quiet. He heard footsteps. Light ones. Princess Era sat down beside him. She was in a plain robe, no formal clothing, her hair loose in a way he had never seen in the palace's public spaces. She looked different. Less composed. More real. She did not say anything for a long time. He did not say anything either. Above them, the 2 moons of Velhar Prime were both visible. One large and pale. One smaller, darker, higher. She spoke to you, Era said. It was not a question. Yes, he said. Silence. I did not ask her to keep you here, she said. I want you to know that. I know, he said. I would not do that. It would not be, she paused, looking for the word. Right. He looked at her. She was looking at the sky. But, she said, and then stopped. But, he said. She was quiet for another moment. I would not object, she said, to you staying. He looked at the sky. Is that a royal opinion or a personal one, he said. She did not answer immediately. The wind moved through the silver-green trees below them. The smaller moon was very bright. Both, she said. He sat with that for a while. It sat quietly, the way true things do, without needing anything added to it. He looked up at the star that was Earth's sun. He had looked it up in the palace's astronomical charts on his first week. He knew exactly where it was from here. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked back at the moons. The arrest happened on a Thursday morning, before the sun had cleared the eastern towers. Kang Yul was in the middle of his courtyard exercises when 6 palace security officers came through the east archway. They were in full formal uniform, not patrol gear, which meant this was not a casual check. Commander Rin was not with them. That told him everything he needed to know about whether this was official. He stopped what he was doing. He looked at the officer in front, a tall man he recognized from the night rotation named Bei, who had always been professionally neutral toward him and who now looked like a man doing something he had not been given enough time to think about. Kang Yul, Bei said. You are asked to come with us. Asked, Kang Yul said. A pause. Required. He came. The charge, read to him in a formal room by a court officer he had never met, was interference in royal intelligence proceedings and unauthorized transmission of sensitive court documents to an external party. The external party was Earth, specifically the Earth Diplomatic Office. The documents, according to the charge, were classified records of Velhari court security structure that Kang Yul had obtained during his time on Princess Era's detail and forwarded today for transmission. It was complete and thorough and entirely invented. He said so, plainly, and was told that his denial had been noted. He was placed in a holding room in the security wing, not a prison cell, another thing that was very carefully not a prison cell, and left there. The room was clean and quiet and locked. He sat down on the bench along the wall and thought. He thought about how fast this had happened. The charge was not improvised. Someone had prepared it carefully, with the right documents and the right language and the right officials who either believed it or were motivated not to question it. The timing was not accidental. He had agreed, 2 days ago, to accept the Queen's offer. Word had apparently reached someone who did not want him to stay. He thought about Lord Wu. He thought about Commander Rin, and whether she knew, and if she knew, what she would do about it. He had spent enough time in difficult situations to know the difference between panic and assessment. He was not panicking. He was assessing. The situation was bad. It was not permanent. He waited. Day found out within 2 hours, through a palace attendant who owed him a small favor and had a conscience that was bigger than her caution. She came to his room with the information and was gone before he had finished reading the note. Day sat at his desk and read the charge. Then he read it again. He was a xenolinguist and a diplomat. He was not a spy, not a security analyst, not a soldier. His entire professional value was in talking to people carefully and understanding what they were really saying. He was not, by any reasonable measure, equipped for what he understood he was about to do. He opened his archive of palace documents and started looking. It took him 4 hours to find what he needed, because he was not a trained investigator and because the records were large and not organized for someone who didn't know what they were looking for. But he was very, very good at patterns in text. And the transmission logs, the official logs that recorded every document access and every outgoing data packet from the palace's diplomatic systems, told a clear story once he knew what shape to look for. The documents in the charge had been accessed, yes. But not from Kang Yul's access profile. From a service account that was registered to the Household Administrative Office of Lord Wu. The transmission had gone out, yes. But the destination routing, buried under 3 layers of redirected addressing, went not to the Earth diplomatic channel but to an external server that Day recognized, from his work in trade documentation, as belonging to a private information broker known to operate in the outer systems. Someone had staged the transmission. They had framed it carefully. They had not been careful enough. Day printed the logs. He looked at them for a moment. He thought about what stepping forward with this information would mean, not for Kang Yul, but for himself, a junior diplomat from Earth, directly contradicting the documented evidence in an active royal court proceeding. He thought about the 6 weeks Kang Yul had been standing quietly in the right position, learning everything without complaining, getting cut and bruised and detained in a foreign empire and never once making Day feel bad about being unable to get him home faster. He put the documents in his inside pocket and went to find Commander Rin. She was in her office. When he knocked, she said enter before he finished knocking. She was already standing. There was a look on her face that was not quite anger, something controlled, like a held breath. You found something, she said. It was not a question. He put the documents on her desk. She looked at them for a long time. Then she looked up at him. How long did this take you, she said. 4 hours, he said. She was quiet for a moment. My team has been working on Wu for 6 weeks. You were looking at the bigger picture, Day said carefully. I was just looking at this one thing. She picked up the documents. These will not be enough on their own. He will say the logs are fabricated. He has people who will say so. She looked at the window. But they will be enough to release Kang Yul and force an open review, which is the part Wu cannot afford. Why can't he afford it? Day said. Because when the review opens, I will present what we have been building for 6 weeks. She said it without triumph, just fact. And that will be enough. She was already moving toward the door. The court assembly was not scheduled. It was called on 2 hours' notice, which in the Velhari court was a significant statement on its own. It meant something urgent, something that could not wait for the normal process. Kang Yul arrived in the hall with Commander Rin. His uniform was not his best one, and his face still showed the particular flatness of someone who had been sitting in a locked room for several hours running assessments, but he stood straight and he was very quiet. He stood to the side. He was not the one who spoke. This was not his proceeding. He knew that. He had been told, clearly, by Commander Rin on the way over, "Stand there, do not speak, let it happen." He stood there. He did not speak. He let it happen. Commander Rin placed the transmission logs before the court. She walked through them without drama, fact by fact, in the clear and efficient way she did everything. The service account. The routing. The destination server. The timeline showing that the access had occurred during a period when Kang Yul was documented as being in the practice courtyard on the opposite side of the palace. Then she placed 6 weeks of accumulated evidence about Lord Wu's network. The intermediaries from the corridor assault. The accounts. The communications. Piece by piece, in order, until the shape of it was clear to the entire room. Lord Wu stood very still throughout. His expression was the expression of someone who knows the game is over and is calculating whether there is any final move. There was none. He had spent 20 years building a position so careful and so layered that its exposure required exactly the combination that had found it: a Velhari security officer working from the inside, a human diplomat who saw text patterns, and a human soldier who had walked into the middle of something without any of the assumptions that would have stopped him from noticing what was wrong. At the end, he said nothing. He was escorted out by security with a calm that was clearly the product of enormous self-control. The room was quiet. Queen Hannah was on her throne. She had said nothing throughout the entire proceeding. She looked at Commander Rin and gave a small, precise nod. Then she looked at Kang Yul, standing at the side of the room. He met her eyes. "You did well," she said, "for someone with no political training." "I didn't do it politically," he said. Her expression was exactly the same as it had been in the tea room when she confirmed her hypothesis. "Exactly," she said. Several months later, on a quiet morning, a letter arrived at a small house in a city on the Korean peninsula of Earth. It was delivered by a standard postal service, in a standard envelope, except that the seal on the back was the silver and dark insignia of the Velhari royal house, and the address inside was written in a formal calligraphy style that the woman who opened it recognized as very official and very foreign and not at all what she expected when she came downstairs in her house slippers. She called her husband. He came from the kitchen. They both looked at the letter. It was 3 pages long. It had been translated, clearly, at some expense, into careful and respectful Korean. It expressed, in language that was both ancient in structure and sincere in feeling, deep appreciation for the service and character of their son, whose conduct had demonstrated qualities that the Velhari Empire considered among the highest a person could possess. It said he was well. It said he was valued. It said the Empire was honored by his presence. It did not say when he was coming home. His mother read it twice. Then she put it on the kitchen table and sat down and looked at it. His father poured 2 cups of tea and sat across from her and also looked at it. After a while she said, "He always did have a talent for getting into things." His father said, "He gets that from your side." She looked at him. He drank his tea. The title had taken 3 weeks to create, because there was no existing Velhari word for what Kang Yul was. He was not a guard. He was not an advisor in the traditional sense. Advisors belonged to houses, carried inherited loyalties, operated within the political system. He was not a diplomat, not a military officer, not a court official of any recognized kind. He was something that the Velhari system had no category for, a person who answered to no house and no history, who owed his position to nothing except the fact that he saw things clearly and said them plainly. The closest translation in English was outer voice. In Velhari, it was a compound word that combined the concepts of perspective from outside and counsel without debt. It was an old grammatical form, rarely used. Some of the court scholars said there had been something like it, 3 centuries ago, in a period of significant political reform. Most of them said it was entirely new. Kang Yul was told about the title by Sue, the protocol officer, who delivered the information with a brief document and her usual efficient manner. He read the document. He looked at the title. He thought about what it meant in practical terms. "Does it come with a salary?" he said. Sue blinked. The position comes with a formal stipend, yes. And full residential accommodation in the East Wing. And, as per the agreement with Earth's diplomatic office, a significant trade benefit package for Earth's outer system stations. She paused. Why do you ask about salary first? Because that's what matters, he said. She made a note. He noticed she was almost smiling. Earth's response to the formal agreement took 6 weeks. It came in the form of a long diplomatic document full of careful language and qualified enthusiasm. What it said, underneath all the careful language, was, "We cannot believe this is happening, we are very excited, please make sure you are actually all right, and yes, we agree." Day was granted a permanent posting at the palace. He received the news in a message from his supervisor that was 1 sentence long: "Your transfer is approved. Congratulations." He sat at his desk and read it several times. Then he went to find Kang Yul to tell him, and when he found him and told him, his eyes were wet, which he attributed firmly and repeatedly to the particular quality of the air in the palace's eastern corridor. Kang Yul said nothing. He put a hand on Day's shoulder for a moment. That was all that was needed. Commander Rin did not apologize for her early suspicion of Kang Yul. He did not expect her to, and would have been made uncomfortable if she had. What she did instead was invite him, about 3 weeks after the Wu proceedings, to attend a review of the palace security rotation. Not as a guard. As someone whose perspective she wanted. He attended. He asked 3 questions. She answered 2 of them and told him the third required more context than she could share at that stage. He said that was fair. After the review, she walked with him back to the East Wing corridor in companionable quiet. At the corner where she turned to go to her own offices, she stopped. "You are difficult to read," she said. "So I've been told," he said. Most people from new civilizations, or from any civilization, when they arrive in a place of power, they want something. Recognition. Status. Advantage. Even the good ones want something. She looked at him. "You are the first person I have observed who seems to genuinely only want to be useful and then go home." He thought about it. "I still want to go home sometimes," he said. "I know," she said. "But you're not going to." It was not unkind. It was simply accurate. They both knew it. He almost said something. He decided not to. "Good night, Commander," he said. "Good night, Outer Voice," she said. The title sounded strange the first few times. He was getting used to it. On a night in the early part of the new season, when the air was cooler and both moons were visible again, Kang Yul sat on the outer wall of the East Garden. He had been at a long briefing with Princess Era's advisory team, his first formal one, 3 hours of dense political and economic information about the outer regions that he was still processing. He had said very little during the briefing. He had listened. He had asked 2 questions, both simple. Both had, apparently, been more useful than he realized, because afterward 2 of the advisors had looked at him with the expression he was learning to recognize, surprise at the shape of the question, then the rapid, private recalculation. He was still not sure how he did it. He just asked what seemed obvious to him. He suspected the obvious things seemed obvious to him partly because he had no investment in the answers being any particular thing. He heard footsteps. Princess Era sat down beside him. She was in her plain robe again. Her hair loose. She had 2 cups in her hands, small round ones, the kind used for the evening drink that was slightly sweet and warm, that he had come to like very much and that Day had confirmed contained no caffeine equivalent. She handed him one. He took it. They sat for a while without talking. The larger moon was low and bright. The smaller one was higher up, a small sharp white light. The silver-green trees in the garden below moved, slowly, as they always did. "How was the briefing?" she said. "Long," he said. "You asked about the water access agreements. I didn't understand why they were structured the way they were." "Nobody understands why they're structured the way they are," she said. "They've been that way for 90 years. Everyone assumed they were that way for a reason." "Are they?" "Advisor Chul is looking into it," she said, and there was something dry and satisfied in her voice that he liked. He drank his tea. She drank hers. Below them, one of the night birds that lived in the garden made its sound, 3 short notes, 1 long one, then silence. My mother likes you, Era said. She likes what I am useful for, he said. That is her way of liking people. A pause. It is not so different from respecting them. He thought about that. Fair, he said. She looked at the sky. He looked at the sky. The star that was the sun of Earth was visible tonight, a small consistent point in the upper left region of the visible field. He had found it on his first week and he always looked for it. He did not always say anything about it. Sometimes he just looked. Can you see it? She said. He glanced at her. She was still looking at the sky, but differently, with the specific attention of someone who has looked something up. Yes, he said. I looked it up again last week, she said. The Stellar Cartography Archive has a full record. Distance, classification, planetary system. She paused. It is a very ordinary star. It is, he agreed. And yet it made something very unusual. He looked at her. She was still looking at the sky, but the corner of her mouth moved. Just slightly. He looked back at the stars. His cup was warm in his hands. The garden was quiet below them. The palace behind them was full of people who were learning, slowly and with considerable resistance, that the universe was a little larger and a little stranger than their 2,000-year-old playbook had accounted for. He did not know what came next. He had not known what came next at any point in this story, which was either the worst part or the best part depending on the moment. He looked at the ordinary star. He looked at the 2 moons. He stayed. Humanity did not conquer the stars with weapons or great ships or perfect plans. They walked into rooms where they did not belong, said the obvious thing nobody else was saying, and somehow, against all reasonable odds, the universe kept making space for them. It was very on brand. END.